All right, guys, what is up? This is Joseph back with the Big 12 Football Digest, and we have news around Title IX. We have news around Rev Share. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this. We have a lot of information that came out today. I'm going to be citing Ross Dellinger a lot. If you're not following him, go give him a follow. Great stuff, great content coming out from him. A lot of news around Rev Share, around what the cap's going to be year in and year out with the new Rev Share settlement. We've got new news around the Title IX situation, which, if you aren't aware, a little while ago in January, there was a government act that said that Title IX is going to apply to NIL payments, okay, from the schools. So just like they have to spend an equal amount of money on men and women's sports and scholarships, or scholarships for the sports, they were trying to play that along with NIL, where it was actually declared they were going to have to do that with the NIL going through the schools with the Rev Share program. And that was big news. We have an update on that, a big update. So make sure you guys stick around. Before we dive into it, like the video, comment down below. Let me know what you guys are thinking about all this. I mean, it is a wild turn of events, but pretty exciting stuff. And I think the moral of the story is going to be pretty positive here and get you guys excited about the future of college football. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We put out a ton of college football content. So if that's what you're into and you want to know more about NIL progression and rev sharing, make sure you stick around. Make sure you hit that notification bell. And let's go ahead and dive in and let's talk about the rev share updates we have. And the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be Title IX. So you can see the title of this. This is from the U.S. Department of Education, and it's U.S. Department of Education resigns Biden 11th hour guidance on NIL compensation. You can see a little bit of a catchy headline here. The NIL guidance rammed through by the Biden administration in its final days is overly burdensome, profoundly unfair, and it goes well beyond what agency guidance is intended to achieve. And I think it might touch a little bit on it in the article, but like I mentioned before, guys, the the move by the Biden administration that they're referring to, the guidance that was rammed through by the Biden administration, was to say that if you were going to give rev share, you had to do it equally between men and women's sports, which would obviously be a huge wrench in the system here, where college sports financially is not driven by women's sports. Have whatever opinion you will there, but it would have really made a weird situation. So I'm not going to touch too much on that. If you guys want to give your opinion on the rev share between men and women in college sports, feel free in the comments. I'm not going to touch on it because it's not a topic that I feel passioned to discuss, but I am going to talk about this article. So the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights today announced it rescinded the 9-page Title IX guidance on name, image, likeness issued in the final days of the Biden administration. Here's the quote. The NIL guidance ran through by the Biden administration in its final days is overly burdensome, profoundly unfair, and it goes well beyond what agency guidance is intended to achieve. Without a credible legal justification, the Biden administration claimed that NIL agreements between schools and student athletes are akin to financial aid and must therefore be proportionally distributed between male and female athletes under Title IX. Enacted over 50 years ago, Title IX says nothing about how revenue-generating athletics programs should allocate compensation among student athletes. The claim Title IX forces schools and colleges to distribute student-athlete revenues proportionality based on gender equity considerations is sweeping and would require legal authority to support it. That does not exist. Accordingly, the Biden NIL guidance is rescinded. A lot of big words there. But that's the situation. So the Title IX that came out, if you guys remember, it was January 16th. All that news was rolling out about Title IX, where we were going to have to split the rev share money from schools between men and women's sports. That was a huge wrench in the system. Again, I want to know your thoughts on this. I'm going to move on. This was just a problem, right? It basically cut the NIL budgets in half for the schools to not be able to pay them primarily to football. I mean, you got to imagine most schools are planning on spending 80-90% of this NIL budget on their football team. And not to mention, of that 80 to 90% they're spending, they're probably going to spend it on about 5 to 10 players for a lot of schools. So I wanted to touch on that and keep you guys up to date there. But we also have exciting news in the Rev Share world. So I'm going to share that next. So stick around. Okay, guys, and here's going to be a bit of a long article or a long paper about what is going on, but don't get overwhelmed by all the information in here. There's some graphics we're going to take a look at to simplify things here in a minute. So don't be intimidated by this, but for those of you that do want a lot of detail, that's what this is going to give you. All right, so let's dive in. So the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, SEC defendant conferences, and the national office provide the following update on the preparation activities for potential final approval of the House settlement. Following the Northern District Court of California's preliminary approval of the settlement in October 2024, significant progress has been made toward creating a new model for college sports that will be put in place in the event the settlement receives final approval. The proposed settlement allows defendant conference members and Division I institutions that opt in to provide enhanced student athlete benefits. The national office and conference defendants created an implementation committee, and within the committee, working groups with representatives from the national office and each of the defendant conferences have been established and meet regularly to advance implementation plans across all key areas. Below is a summary of that implementation progress. I mean, quick recap, guys. Preliminary approval in October 2024. Feel very strongly that this is going to be the future of college football. And kind of rough draft is, or quick summary, all that is that schools are going to be able to pay the players directly through the schools using a rev share model. And this is where the details get exciting and are a little more interesting and fun and give you a clear picture for the road ahead. Cap management and reporting. If approved by the court, the new model permits each school to make direct payments to student athletes of up to 22% of the average Autonomy 5 athletic revenue, including media, ticket, and sponsorship, starting in the 2025 to 2026 academic year. Let's read this back one more time. If approved by the court, the new model permits each school to make direct payments to student athletes of up to 22% of the average Autonomy 5 athletic revenue, including media, ticket, and sponsorship, starting the 2025-26 academic year. Quick run through what that means, guys. They're going to take the average of the Power 5 schools, and whatever the average revenue that the Power 5 schools are making, you will be able to pay up to 22% of that as a rev share program to the athletes at your school. This is groundbreaking stuff, guys. So the cool thing about this, I mean, it really is a win-win. So one, the schools will get to control the NIL money, which has caused a bundle of problems already where the schools weren't paying them. It was the boosters paying them. So a booster could want a player and the school or the coach doesn't want that player. And you can run into some weird situations there that did happen more often than you might think. But on top of that here, guys, there's a direct investment. I'm a guy that comes from a sales background, right? That's what I've thrived in, and why I've loved sales and why a lot of people love sales is you get paid based on what you produce, right? And the cool thing about this is that 22%, that's a huge number, a huge percentage of the revenue going to the players. And what it does for them is allows them, the better you make college football, the more you'll get paid. And we'll touch on it here in a bit, but you grow college football, you're going to get paid more, right? College football can grow very quickly and very exciting. Let's keep going here. But again, 22% of the school's generated revenue can go to the players. A cap management and reporting platform is being developed to facilitate the tracking, reporting, and enforcement of rules related to these direct payments. Sorry, I lost my spot. And is advancing on schedule through a partnership with LBI Software. LBI Software has experience building and maintaining similar systems for Major League Baseball, the National Women's Soccer League, the National Basketball Association, among others. Key milestones have been met in system architecture, user interface design, and compliance framework development. The group has completed initial testing phases and is moving forward with enhanced features for roster management and financial tracking. Rules development is progressing in parallel with system capabilities, with particular focus on implementation timelines and compliance protocols. Training for use of the platform will be scheduled after final approval for all defendant conference institutions and non-defendant conference institutions that opt in. So that little line at the end there, so the defendant conference institutions are the Power Five, but that non-defendant conference institutions says that other schools will also be able to take advantage of this if they'd like to opt in. So it seems like in the very near future, we will see all the schools be able to pay up to 22%. And what else I liked is there's a tracking system. And I think this is going to put more power into the school's hands about enforcing the rules. Now, right now, if there's illegal tampering, and I guess this wouldn't do tampering, but if schools break the rules, there's going to be a little more control and a little more oversight. Where right now there's a lot of working in the shadows with NIL and a lot of shadiness. So NIL Clearinghouse, the proposed settlement permits student athletes to continue to enter into NIL agreements with third parties. If the settlement is approved by the court, all Division I student athletes must submit third-party agreements totaling $600 or more to the NIL Clearinghouse for review to ensure they are legitimate, fair market NIL agreements and not being used as pay for play. So win there. So yes, they'll still be able to do third-party NIL deals, but they're going to be any NIL agreement is going to have to be reviewed to make sure it's not pay per play. So we'll get a little more, alliance and agreement and insight, oversight on what is going on with the NIL deals, where it really is the wild, wild west right now. The NIL Clearinghouse development has met several important benchmarks in partnership with Deloitte. The evaluation framework is taking shape with substantial progress on both technical infrastructure and operation protocols. Student athlete feedback has been incorporated into the design process through focus groups and stakeholder meetings. Initial testing has yielded valuable insights for system refinement, particularly regarding user experience and deal submission processes. Instructions for reporting third-party NIL agreements will be provided before the clearinghouse requirements take effect. I mean, just kind of like I said, it sounds like things are well underway to get there, and it seems very clear that this is going to happen. Again, it's only gone through preliminary approval, but it does seem that this is going to be the case moving forward. More details coming in a second for you guys. Stick around. We're going to do the give some more info, but also show you guys some graphs that'll probably simplify it a little. I know there was a lot of word salad in there, right? These are legal documents. So stick around. These graphs will make it a little simpler, a little easier to understand. All right, guys. And here's one of the graphs I was talking about. I guess just a little PDF. The other one's more of a graph. So this was sent to some D1 schools today. How settlement opting in applies to all Division I schools. Division I schools are permitted but not required to provide new benefits, direct name, image and likeness, NIL payments, scholarships above limits permitted in the 2024-2025 Division I manual. To student athletes made available through the settlement. For schools that opt in, each school may determine the level of benefits to provide up to the limit set forth in the settlement. Guys, like we talked about, 22% of the revenue from the categories mentioned, which we'll touch more on in the next graphic, but 22% of the revenue, up to 22% of the revenue can be paid from the schools to the players, which gives you an advantage in NIL if you're willing to pay the 22%, which for some schools is going to be too much money. They won't be able to compete. But for the schools that do want to pony up, put out the money, they are going to be able to pay quite a bit of money to players. So should be pretty exciting. Continuing on, general release of legal claims by student athletes against NCAA conferences and Division I schools. All scholarships will be converted to equivalencies for all where is it? all scholarships will be converted to equivalencies, and for all schools that opt in, NCAA Division I scholarships limits will be eliminated. All student athletes must report third-party NIL deals worth $600 or over, like we talked about in the last clip. That's just so if there is or are big NIL deals happening outside of the schools, which will still continue to happen, we'll at least have more insight because they will have to be reported. Next up, step one, determine whether your school opts in. Does your school plan to provide payments or additional scholarships made available through the settlement? And realistically, guys, let's be honest, every school is going to opt into this. It would be crazy not to, right? Not I mean, I'm sure we could have a couple weird outliers, but the idea that you wouldn't do this, you're not going to be competitive in NIL if you don't do this. We already had today Alabama and Georgia, I believe, and I'm sure other states are going to follow suit, are making NIL payments non-taxable. So, where like they don't count against your state income tax, something along those lines, to make it so they have an advantage, right? So if they're offering NIL, other states that are making it part of your taxable income, you're keeping way more of that in Georgia and Alabama. Keep an eye on that. I think it's going to be. It could just go flat out. If some states do it, all states are going to do it, because if you're taking 20-30% of someone's NIL money through taxes, that's a huge disadvantage for your school to be able to go get players. So your school is opting in. In this scenario, your school is bound by new roster sizes and should determine which benefits it will provide to student athletes. Continue to step two. Step two, providing benefits. Determine the level of benefits your school provides to student athletes. Examples of opting in: your school provides educational incentives and graduation bonuses to student athletes in addition to existing Alston payments capped at $59.80. Your school does not provide any additional benefits or scholarships, but wants the flexibility to provide additional benefits or scholarships during an academic year. Your school exceeds the equivalency maximum in any sport in the Division I 24-25 rules manual. Your school provides direct NIL payments to student athletes. So basically, if you're opting in, it gives you the ability to pay players up to a total of 22% of the annual revenue, the average annual revenue of the Power 5 teams, which will be adjusted annually. We'll talk more about that on this next slide. I'm just going to bring us over to it right now. The pool cap. The maximum dollar value of additional payments and or benefits a school may provide to its student athletes during an academic year. The pool cap will be calculated and released manually, calculated by totaling 8 of the membership financial reporting system reports, revenue categories for each school from the 5 defendant conferences and Notre Dame. So the Power 5 schools and Notre Dame. I know it's really Power 4 now, but it looks like Oregon State and Washington State are still in there. Then dividing the total by the number of schools from the defendant. Actually, weird little twist. That's also going to include all the, I think it was like a bunch of schools transferred from the Mountain West to Pac-12. But anyways, moving on. Dividing the total by the number of schools from the defendant conferences plus Notre Dame, then taking 22% of the resulting dollar figure. Now let's look at what's included in that. The MFRS revenue categories include ticket sales, does not include donations tied to ticket sales, input revenue from participation in away games. So if a team pays you to come play them away, media rights revenues, NCAA distributions and grants, non-media conference distributions. So, like the conference payouts to the schools, direct revenues from participation in football bowl game, conference distributions of football bowl revenues, and athletic department revenues from sponsorships, royalties, licensing agreements, and advertisement. A ton of information there, guys. Stick around. I'm going to give you guys my final thoughts on this, and I'm going to encourage you guys to shed any light. It's a ton of information, but I think it's a lot of valuable stuff here. So stick around. I'll give you my final thoughts. So we talked about Title IX, the Title IX ruling that was going to apply to NIL being revoked. We talked about the new Rev Share program, the details that have been sent out to schools, lots of exciting stuff. If you made it this far, please do make sure you guys like the video. That'll help get it out to more fans. Also, comment down below, what are your opinions on all of this? There's a lot of data in here and a lot of information. Anything I missed, any other context you guys could add, drop it in the comments. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We put out a ton of Big 12 content, ton of college football content. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Also, that's about it. But my final thoughts are going to be that this is a win, right? The Title IX thing, in my eyes, was not a good thing. I said I wasn't going to give a ton of opinions, so I won't go too deep into it. But I don't think it's completely fair that you were going to have to split revenue between sports that make a ton of money and sports that make no money. I'm just going to leave it at that. I think this is a win. I think it's good for the future of college football, and I think it's going to continue to put the money back through the sports that are making it, whether that's football, basketball, whatever. And moving onward, the process, the 22% annually, I love that. So every year they're going to see what the average revenue of these schools are, and then they're going to make that 22% of that revenue is the budget. So that means as college football becomes more valuable, as will the NIL budgets, right? They'll be able to give more of that revenue sharing back to the players. I think it's a really good model that will continue to get better. Or if college football does get worse, it'll get worse, and kind of protect the schools and protecting the players on both sides of the coin there. I think it's a big win across the board, guys. Like the video, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the notification bell. I'm out of here. Go Big 12.